My future was in peril. I faced death twice. Would I have to face it again? Or could I finally turn it around? My story of major health recovery is about finding faith and food in my 50s after nearly a lifetime of darkness and despair. It's also about my sister's love and devotion to heal with food. A long, long time ago, after a year of pre-diabetes, I was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic at the age of 15. Type 1 diabetes is a chronic, debilitating, difficult to manage disease that has absolutely no cure. I hated it. I hated everything about it. During a long hospital stay, I was told to manage every single aspect of my very young life for the rest of my life, especially the gazillion finger pricks and insulin injections, which later became an insulin pump adhered to my body 24/7 just to keep me alive. And just by having this disease, my life would be shortened. From that moment on, at the age of 15, every step of the way, I fought it, and I paid dearly for it. Over the next 40 years, that rebellion grew, and with it, so did my medical and mental diseases. I was a binge eater, a binge drinker. I did drugs and whatever else to fight against this incurable disease. I spent a great deal of time in doctors' offices, ambulances, emergency rooms, hospitals, etc., with people 30, 40, and 50 years older than me, battling the same diseases that I was at a far younger age. My body was deteriorating quickly. My list of diseases was long, and it started in my early 20s. So to give you an idea of what I've dealt with, here's some, not all, of the diseases that I have dealt with over that 40-year period. Type 1 diabetes, depression, anxiety disorder, binge stress eating disorder, severely impaired hypoglycemic unawareness, urge incontinence. Some people might be a little uncomfortable with what I'm about to say with this, but urge incontinence is not when you cough or sneeze and you have a little dribble of urine. It is when your entire bladder unleashes. I was wearing Depend diapers in my late 30s and 40s. And I share that with you. I'm being very open about my life these days because it has helped other people change their life. That was not a good time for me. Continuing on, automatic neuropathy, diabetic retinopathy, hypoglycemic seizures, lots of them. Kidney disease, chronic stage 3, ADD, attention deficit disorder, mild cognitive impairment, chronic peripheral neuropathy, hypothyroidism, high cholesterol, severe degenerative disc disease with stenosis in my neck, trigger fingers, all 10 fingers had surgery, carpal tunnel, brain-based cognitive impairments, glaucoma, cataracts, arthritis, major depressive disorder, osteoedema, heart attack, and diabetic ketoacidosis, which I'll talk about, irritable bowel syndrome, yet another one I'm excited to share with everybody, heart bypass surgery performed robotically, which I'll talk to you about a little bit later. You don't see a cut here from that, as I am cut since it was done robotically underneath and to the side. Metabolic vascular encephalopathy, or simply called brain damage. This one is the toughest one for me of that entire list because it was initially diagnosed as early onset Alzheimer's. We have Alzheimer's throughout our family because the damage I did by being an uncontrolled type 1 diabetic for so long did damage to my brain. I was not able to speak. I was able to speak, but I was not able to formulate words. So I really had difficulty with this, and I was hospitalized in a mental hospital because of it. This one is the most difficult one. I'm here being able to talk with you today, and the reason why I'm reading from the script is because of my impairment of memory. So I can't even think of the word memory, and brain processing. Okay, so now we've got that out of the way. Let's talk about my heart. You see, diabetes and heart disease are strongly linked. As you probably know, heart disease is a leading cause of death in our society. Heart issues started in my late 40s and continued with a widowmaker heart attack, along with diabetic ketoacidosis at 51 years old. And that picture on the left that you see was just a month before that heart attack occurred. This was hours after gorging on a rack of ribs dripping in barbecue sauce, deep fried onion rings, potatoes smothered with butter and sour cream, and interestingly, death by chocolate for dessert. My recollection is limited. I was in and out of consciousness for how long I do not know. It was through the night and early morning. I do remember throwing up a lot, pain in my jaw, extreme exhaustion, the likes of which I've never experienced before. Fortunately for me, I was supposed to be at a church member's home that next morning. You see, 1 year prior to this moment I'm speaking of in my heart attack, I found faith. I had never believed in God, ever. But once I did, my deep-seated anger, fears, and self-loathing started to fall away. My life was forever altered and actually saved in the most amazing ways, and this is just one of them. When I didn't arrive as planned and wasn't responding to calls and texts, the next morning, my church friend gathered others at my front door. Police wouldn't break down the door as no one could see me, but they knew something was wrong. My friends knew. My friend found a young man to scale my balcony. He saw me on the floor. My body was limp, my skin gray. After transport, triage, and stabilization, I was admitted to ICU. I had my first set of heart stents placed, recovery in the hospital, and weeks in heart rehabilitation. Now you think that would have shook me to the core, right? No. Not long after, I continued to binge eat. As a result, over the next year and a half, I had 3 separate angiograms to put additional heart stents and balloons to my arteries to open up the clogged arteries. Food addiction consumed my every thought. Then days prior to my 53rd birthday, with my sister, as she always has been in hospitals and places with me, I had heart bypass surgery done robotically. As I mentioned before, that's why you don't see cuts here. My cuts are all here and to the side. My faith was so strong, I was not afraid. But recovery was painful, long, and I had complications, including the 2 jugs that you see in this picture, which, with pneumonia, those fluids were drained from my lungs. So what do you think I did shortly thereafter? You think I learned my lesson? No, I continued to binge eat. Boy, I'll tell you, the medical and pharmaceutical establishments absolutely loved me. If it wasn't enough, a mere 5 months after this heart bypass, my blood sugar dropped dangerously low into a seizure while driving over this bridge that you see in this picture. It is 600 feet high. Due to hypoglycemia unawareness, a dangerous complication of type 1 diabetes, I could not detect my blood sugars. These can result in prolonged exposure to hypoglycemia, resulting in a seizure, loss of consciousness, and/or brain damage. These seizures happened a lot, hence the brain damage. Due to the seizure, I lost control of the car at a high rate of speed. The car careened over the bridge. Per witnesses driving behind me, who happened to be a couple, one was an off-duty paramedic, the other was an off-duty nurse. Someone was looking after me. It took hours for firefighters to use the jaws of life to extricate me from the wreckage, and a body cage to pull me back up. And I was off to the ER and hospital once again. I think I had one of those, what do you call it when you go to some place quite often? What do you get, a
frequent flyer?
Frequent flyer. I was a frequent flyer in many different hospitals, I think. Time passed and my faith continued to grow. Other life events were on the horizon that forced me to find a reason to change. My whys. Why to change? After years of our own declining health, not too different from my own, our mother, Mother Bunny, was diagnosed with colon cancer. I was fortunate to spend a month with her at Betsy's cottage. That, ladies and gentlemen, was the beginning of my first why. Watching my frail mother wither away is difficult for me to discuss. But what I can tell you is I did not want to go out like that. You see, my mother and I were similar. We neglected our health and were binge eaters, as was my sister Betsy. I knew that this would be my end as well, but would happen for me at a much younger age than her. In November of 2016, my mother passed away. I returned home and became consumed how I did not want to go out like that. I looked back on the years and years that my sister encouraged me to change what I eat, as she has done. Betsy tried the same thing with our mom, as she spoke about, but our mom did not comply. Our mom made her choice. She suffered horribly and died a painful death. Shortly thereafter, I was then told I needed a second heart bypass surgery. This was my second why. My mother's death and looking down the barrel of a second heart bypass surgery propelled me to finally make the right choice. I was finally ready to take my health back. So with my sister leading the charge as a mentor and health coach, I spent 30 days in an intensive immersion program at True North Health Center in Santa Rosa, California. Maybe some of you have heard of it and know about True North Health Center. And this was to learn whole food plant-based eating at 100%. That's what was needed for me. It was the spring of 2017 and I was 54 years old. Upon arrival at True North with my sister, notice how she's always with me, helping me. I was excited, but once she left, I was in complete and utter shock. Could I change 40 years of binge eating? What happens when I get home? I live elsewhere. I do not live, we're hundreds of miles away from one another. I have no support at home. I live alone. I'm all alone. No one eats this way. My questions and anxiety were absolutely intense, but I stayed the course. I committed. And within just a couple of days, eating clean, whole food, plant-based, stripping my taste buds of the gunk of 40 years. Just a couple of days at True North, I started better than I had felt in my entire life. Every day got better. My body started to heal itself, to recover. I took what I learned and never looked back. 6 months later, a heart nuclear stress test proved I did not need a second heart bypass surgery. My cardiologist was so dumbfounded that he and his wife changed to whole food plant-based eating, went to a similar program, and is whole food plant-based to this day. Since my whole food plant-based immersion, I've had unbelievable health transformations, and here's just a few. My type 1 diabetes is in control for the first time in 40 years. And my diabetic A1C average over those 40 years was nearly cut in half to 5.6, which is considered a non-diabetic range. I've lost 40 pounds. I don't know why I just jump over that. That's important. My energy level, happiness, and outlook on life are through the roof. I went from 18 pills per day down to 1. And if you'll allow me, I usually toss these bags over my head to show you, but this is bag 1, and this is bag 2, and this was my life. Those went away. Do you remember that list of medical conditions? Most are gone, except for 2. The brain damage, which I've worked really hard at and continue to do, but I will always have that. And until a cure is found, I will always be a type 1 diabetic, and I work very hard to try to change that. My choice to find faith and embrace a whole food, plant-based lifestyle finally gave me a life worth living, and so much more. I'm so grateful. I'm grateful I chose faith, first and foremost. I'm grateful I chose to change. I'm grateful I listened to my sister, finally, chose a different road than our mother did. I'm grateful I chose plant-based eating, stayed the course, and survived to be with you today. Thank you.